Hello everybody, it's a real pleasure to be here at the beginning of this event. My name is David Marsh, coming from EduCluster Finland, and as always it's a joy to work with our team in Realvi. And in this case what we're talking about is, I think you could call it the English problem, and that is the issue of why is it so very difficult sometimes for young people, for our students, to learn a language like English. Now, you're probably tired of hearing how often people have said that, this study or that study shows that Finland is at the top of the world in terms of education. But actually, when you look at Finnish educational history, that has not always been the case. The reason that Finland has excelled is because we identified problems and then we found solutions for them. And one of those problems used to be that our young people, particularly our boys, did not actually enjoy learning English. So we had an English problem. So very briefly now, let's just have a little look at what that problem is. One key issue relates to history, and that is that if you look at the pedagogy, if you look at the science of teaching English, which prevails in many schools and many countries around the world, it's actually based on how we learnt to talk Latin in the 16th century. That when Latin was no longer used as a spoken language between many people, it became a subject in its own right. And so students spent their time studying Latin as structures, as vocabulary, as grammar, and so on. And that tradition has come all the way into the future in how some of our schools and some of our systems, particularly the weak ones, still teach English. And yet, in 1629, we have a person who would be called one of the elder statesmen of education in Europe, the Czech John Amos Comenius, writing a book called The Gate of Language Unlocked, arguing that the only way to teach another language is to teach it directly in relation to content. So what Comenius was saying then, 1629, was you can't teach a language effectively as a subject in its own right. And yet here we are, 2021, and many of us are doing just that. Attitudes. That we have had a prevailing attitude. It's something that is spoken by parents to their children, or by grandparents to their parents, or by school teachers to parents about their children, or by teachers to children, which is English is hard. It's the hard option. Languages are for the brighter students. That attitude is true if you look at the ways in which English can be taught in some schools, because frankly it's really boring and it's enough to make any student lose interest in learning the language. Is it a hard option? Taught badly, it's miserably hard. Taught well, not at all. It's an option which is absolutely accessible for almost all kids. Science. What does the science say about how we should be teaching English? What does the science reveal about why there are weaknesses in the standards of English that we have in our schools after even maybe 3, 5, 7 years of study? The science says it is unnatural to learn a language as the object of study. The brain is not wired to embrace that kind of learning. It is natural to learn another language through learning content. In other words, learning through English is natural and learning about English is unnatural. The science has been particularly strong in the last 15 years because of what we're seeing through the educational neurosciences. Let's look at ownership. Who owns language? Who owns English? We have a big tradition of the so-called English-speaking countries, the USA, Great Britain, Australia, and others, saying or giving the impression that they own the language. We have a whole cohort of language teachers who've been taught that English is a foreign language and that they are like diplomats who are teaching people around the world the language which belongs to the mothership, so to speak. Absolute nonsense. It's a nonsense about any language. It's particularly a nonsense about English as a lingua franca. We don't own languages. We just look after them for the next generation. And actually, those who use, they are the owners of language. It is not foreign. English is no longer a foreign language in many parts of the world. It's an additional language, and the ownership is with the people who use it. Industry. There are long-standing major industries, particularly in publishing, particularly in testing, who have been blocking innovation in how we learn English. They've been blocking the innovation for various reasons to do with maintaining the status quo, the way things are, because that helps them to maintain, if not to maximize, the profit that they have on selling the textbooks or selling the tests, even though we know that many of those textbooks are no longer suitable for purpose and many of the tests are no longer sometimes suitable for anything. So we have traditional industry also as one of those factors. And that industry has helped us develop a new acronym, and the acronym is called Tenno, or Tenno. And Tenno means teaching English for no obvious reason. And if you want to make sure that a large proportion of the students become detached, become disinterested, and fail to learn the structures and the grammar with maybe a little bit of communicative training in the middle, then it is because they don't see the reason, because the learning of the language is not geared to the real world and to their real life. So what can we do? We can start early. Absolutely essential for learning additional languages. We can learn through immersive environments. If you want to learn to swim, you don't learn by standing next to the pool watching people swim. You learn by safely and gently getting into the water and learning yourself how to move your arms, how to move your legs, how to move your body. Learning through immersive environments, particularly now that we have such a huge potential from technology, is one of the most exciting ways forward. Learning by doing, learning by integrating English into project-based learning, into other subject teaching, and using formative assessment, using assessment which is in the hands of the students, where they can see their progression, not in terms of tests and test numbers and ABC or 50, 40, 50, 100, but actually in terms of, gosh, look what I can do in this language. These are things that we can do. We have an opportunity because of the last basically 18 months and the shock that has been to our system, what we've learned from that system, to really get involved with changing the miserable performance that so many of our youngsters have towards English. And that is essentially about emotion, because if the deeper emotive self says, I can't do languages, because the ear has heard for so long generations saying English is hard, or generations saying, I don't care what you can do in English, I need to see what the test result is, then those emotions will block the opportunities and the potential for a lot of people to learn English. If we put our children, our students into environments, into immersive environments, if we give them the ownership of tools, if we build their self-confidence towards the joy of learning another language and the fun of learning another language, the grammar and the structures will fall into place. In other words, we move from the old-fashioned, first I instruct you, direct instruction, and then if there's time, I'll give you opportunities to discover, into guided discovery first and no direct instruction. In the old days, our educational system was based on, first I explain to you, and then Maybe if there's time, you could do a bit of exploration and then I test you. Whereas now, the mantra for learning English successfully and many other subjects is, first we explore and then we explain. And that is the core reason why, if we give students ownership of where they learn, how they learn, and what they learn, we are going to revolutionize the learning of English in our systems and in our country. Thank you.